सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. This book is it's more of a booklet. And it's different, because all the Vedanta texts that we study are in the form of poetry. This is the only one that is in prose form. Yeah. Why? Just for a change. So this is something interesting because one of the few Vedanta texts that is in prose form. But why are Vedantins poets? This is something we have to understand. It's not that they are poets. It's that when the whole tradition is such that it is easy to remember, it's an oral tradition. So it goes from the mouth of the teacher to the ear of the student, correct? And so the small details and the not so small details also are easy to remember if you make a little song or a poetry about it. Especially stuff like Titiksha. What is Titiksha? Sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilaparahitam sa titiksha nigadyate. Even if you don't know the meaning of Titiksha, it sounds wonderful. So this was the definition of Titiksha from another text called Viveka Chudamani. Yeah, Viveka Chudamani defines Titiksha like that. Don't worry about Titiksha, It will come. Have Titiksha, the definition of Titiksha will come. Yeah. So now we are going to see this book. And there is a nice story about this book. Is that this is a book that is taught in a number of Vedanta courses, especially in the beginning, because it's a wonderful compendium of basic Vedanta things, especially if one has joined in the middle and forgotten the basics or not attended the basics earlier. So the basics are very, very nicely and succinctly put. However, one must not come to the wrong conclusion that this is a basic text. And so I can catch some basic Z's during class. Yeah. It may be a basic text that defines basic things, but it's a very, very wonderful text, as we will see how it will unfold. Very clear and concise. And as with all the Vedanta texts, who is the author of this one? Shankaracharya. So they say. Yeah. In great contrast to the American or the Western penchant for individualism, here we have something else going on. Here, if somebody is famous, or the tendency in India was to attribute everything to that person, because they were not really interested in their own. What is the point of writing a book? So that it will get read, correct? And then supposing there are two books. One is authored by Shankaracharya and the other one is authored by some Tata. Tata means grandfather, Tatacharya. Which one is going to be more read? The first one, naturally, because Adi Shankara looked so famous. The person was brilliant. So the idea was to just put it there. or that was to put it in the name of the most exalted being. It was it was not some kind of a, it was kind of a mark of respect. That is one, example. That's one explanation of this. The other explanation is very interesting because how many Shankaracharyas are there? 4 or 5? That used to be earlier. Now it is too many to count. Yeah. Why? How do these Shankaracharyas just come up, when no one is looking? How? How do they manage to just blossom? Well, this is again has to do with the story of, the what is that? The etiquette, the Shankaracharya etiquette, or the etiquette among renunciates in ancient, the recommended etiquette among renunciates in ancient India. And what was this etiquette? In those days they didn't have texting and email and cell phones, correct? Yeah. And of course, they were in the Himalayas or somewhere in the mountains in the south. And in those days, there were more lions and tigers than now, Yeah, those days, lions and tigers were not part of the endangered species list. And they brought with them an appetite. So you can see what would happen is that they would go away. The Shankaracharya would go away on a little tour, a walking tour, a bhiksha tour, some kind of a tour to go away for 3 or 4 months and then would not come back. And of course, there is no way of knowing what has happened to this person, where this person is. Is the person alive or is it in the belly of the tiger? We don't know anything. And so how long to keep the mutt? The mutt means the spiritual seat, vacant. So every Shankaracharya would always have trained somebody who was to be the successor, the spiritual heir, so to speak. Not, one's own son or daughter, because the renunciates were not married, but somebody who came as a student and was selected to be the spiritual heir. And so the heir would wait for a certain prescribed amount of time, I think a year or 2 years or something, and then would declare, okay, I am occupying this seat. I have promoted myself from, heir to the new Shankaracharya. So there would be a lot of festivities because people like a spiritual leader to occupy the seat. They don't like to see the seat empty, and there would be a lot of festivities and wonderful things would, happen. And then after this fellow has occupied the seat, the other fellow, the senior Shankaracharya, who had escaped the belly of the tiger and everything, was just sick or was traveling somewhere or went into too long a samadhi and then decided to come back, started to walk towards the village. And then from the blacksmith and the people or the sellers, the vegetable sellers on the road would be informed of the news. What was the news? You know what? Your successor has already occupied your seat. Uh-oh, what to do now? Can't go back. This is against the dharma of competition. There is no competition. There is nothing to compete. In fact, the reason one becomes a renunciate is to stop competing with anything, And so therefore what? You don't compete for resources, and especially you're not going to compete for your seat. You cannot say, that was a very nice throne, it had red velvet on it, I want it back. Oh, by the way, can I just have my iPod? Okay, you can have the throne. No. it's all given up. So then when he hears from the vegetable seller, or somebody on the road that, your heir has, because you were gone for 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, your heir has occupied the throne, the dharma, the what was expected of this person was to sit right there. If he heard it 12 miles away, 15 miles away, or 50 miles away, he would just sit right there and meditate. And then the people would bring bhiksha, and very soon another mutt was born. Yeah, again, no competition. So from the original 4 Shankaracharyas and then the 5th one of the Kanchi Mutt, then now there are innumerable numbers of Shankaracharyas roaming the earth of India. Only India, because they're not allowed to come outside of India. They're not allowed to cross the ocean. Yeah. So if you want to become a Shankaracharya, you have to relocate to India and then never come back here. That is one of the qualifications. Yeah. So this is how there are so many things. There is one Shankaracharya of Hariharapura in Karnataka. There is one Shankaracharya in Kolhapura. There is one Shankaracharya. There are 2-3 Shankaracharyas in Maharashtra. There is so many Shankaracharyas in Madhya Pradesh, or it's everywhere. The place is small. Again, these are not big mutts which people have even heard of. They're small ones, and these are highly respected acharyas. So the second, hypothesis is that this booklet could have been written by one of the acharyas in the tradition who did not sign his full name and just said Shankaracharya. Doesn't matter. But one thing to know is that the consensus is that this was not written by Adi Shankaracharya. And why do we say Adi Shankaracharya? The first. First one, Adi. So it doesn't matter who wrote it. It's a very good book, and it's like a primer in the sense that if any definition is forgotten, if anything I just have little trouble with, or if any of the other texts, whatever I had heard, I have forgotten, this is a very good thing to look at. Yeah. And so this is something which is a wonderful text. And without much ado, I would like to get into the text. It begins with an invocation. And what is the invocation? You can repeat after me. That is the only part of the book that has that is poetic. This invocation is in the form of poetry, Anushtup Chanda. Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattvabodho Bhidhiyate. Again, Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattvabodho Bhidhiyate. And this text is taught in a number of 3-year courses and a number of Vedānta courses. And who found this text and introduced it into all the 3-year courses in India? How did Swamiji introduce this? It was purely based on necessity. One sadhu came to Swamiji and said, "Quick, I have been asked to go abroad and I would like to teach something there. So quick, you teach me something that I can go abroad and teach." And so that is how, because he didn't have time to learn. So something quick that can be done in a month was picked. And this was the book that Swamiji picked up. And then, of course, it's so wonderful that now it is being taught in a number of ashrams. This is part of the curriculum. And so this is what this is how the book was introduced into the ashram curriculums. And the word bodha means knowledge, tattva means reality, the knowledge of reality. What do we mean knowledge of the truth, knowledge of reality? See, tat means that, tattva means thatness. So anything that I point to with the word that is not really that, correct? So when I say pot, what is that? The truth of the pot is not pot, correct? Truth of the pot is not that. And don't make me go into that whole thing. Where is potness? Where is potness? So that, what is pot? That which has potness. So you cannot say pot has potness, because that which has potness is pot, correct? So what is that? That should be outside of pot. So non-pot you cannot say has potness. Pot you cannot say has potness. So where is potness? You know, that is what the whole world of mithya is like. So what I think to be real is at best a dependent transactional reality. So the truth of the pot is outside the pot, the truth of the cloth is outside the cloth. Same thing with hat, cat, mat, rat, everything, you know. Because each thing disintegrates into something else, into something else, and something else. And you can make a living out of trying to distill everything. And you know, what will you get? Just wine, that's all. You can open a distillery. But this tattva, when you distill, it really refers back to the observer, you. Because ultimately everything comes back to you. There is nothing, there is no jagat, no reality outside of yourself. No matter how much you may be convinced otherwise, and no matter how much you don't want to see it, this is the truth. And this is what the knowledge of this reality alone is what is needed to lead a sane life. You know, this is one of the basic definitions of life. What do we want? Sanity. When do we want it? Yesterday. To lead a sane life, we have to know what is what, and what is and what isn't. Because this confusion is a costly confusion that takes one away from the truth of oneself. So the sane reality is to be able to look at situations, people, things, and events in my life objectively. Objectively means as it is, not as I want it to be, or not as I fear it is. You see, there is a difference between the two things. So one is what? Based on raga, desires, positive, and the other one is based on what? Dvesha, things that I want to avoid. So the whole life is colored. So we have two pairs at least of glasses. One is raga colored glasses. In fact, the word raga means a certain coloration based on what I want in life. And the second pair of glasses is based on what I'm afraid of. Sometimes we call up and conjure our own fears. And so the whole life is led with these two pairs of interchangeable glasses. I mean, generally people have two glasses, one for seeing, one for reading. Now, this is not how it is. These glasses have to do with what? Approaching and avoiding situations, things, people, based on what I want to have and based on what I fear is actually going to happen. So where do these fears or dislikes and likes, where do they come from? What is the source of the fear of these raga and dveshas? Huh? Or the unconscious, where does the unconscious come from? Ajnanam. Ajnanam. Not knowing the unconscious. What is the unconscious? When you say collective unconscious, what is the common thing that every jiva has? Ignorance. Ignorance of what? Aham. I. The I ignorance causes there to be all kinds of wants and don't wants based on this ignorance. Because I don't know my own glory and I cannot therefore inhabit it, so I seek fulfillment in objects, situations and things and people, relationships and people. Nothing wrong. But what I'm saying is, if I am dependent on the other for my fulfillment, then I'm constantly worried about how this other is, leading their life. This is the problem. So, therefore, what happens, whether the other is a thing, or it could be a pet, it could be, a plant, it could be anything. But if my heart is given away to that, and that becomes a source of my sanity, and whatever I say that this is for real, you see, this is where I'm, expounding on the title. This is what is going to be there with me all the time. And then what happens? It breaks. It breaks. Yeah, I was talking, somewhere in a satsang in DC. I was talking about the story. This is something which is there in the Zen tradition as well. And this is the Zen Buddhist story. This man went to the market and searched high and low and found one very fine bone china cup with a cover, a lid. Why? To brew tea for his teacher. See, that's why the word teacher starts with T-E-A. Tea. So he wanted to make some tea for the teacher. And then what did he do? He made the tea and then it's bone china. And this bone china is a nuisance, because that's why it's called bone china, because most of the time it has osteoporosis. Yeah. It disintegrates. You touch it and it becomes powder, because you have to be careful when you wash. You have to be, yeah. How do I know? Because there is one bone china cup upstairs. So that's how I know. So you have to be very careful when you wash it, and it should not be put out in the sun, and it shouldn't be in the shade. It's a nuisance. It's got osteoporosis. That's why it's called bone china. You touch it and it becomes powder. So this student, with all Shraddha, and what is Shraddha will come again in this text, don't worry. With all Shraddha, brewed the best cup of tea in the whole world and put the lid on it and took it with all reverence to the teacher. And then what happened after he took it to all reverence? As he was approaching the teacher to give the tea, there was a little kink in the carpet, a little kind of a thing in the carpet. And what happened? I mean, we all know what happened. He tripped. And after he tripped, what happened? Tea gone, cup broken, and he started to cry. What did he say? I looked high and low in all the markets to get this cup just for you. And look, it's gone. It's broken. Of course, the tea, was all over the place. He was not even thinking about that. He was thinking about the cup, which was gone. And then what did the teacher say? If the teacher was within samsara, the teacher would have said, yes, I know. It's so sad. That's too bad. Teacher didn't say anything like that. What did the teacher say? It was already broken. No, it wasn't broken. I checked. And he said, repeated it. It was already broken. So that which is subject to birth is already subject to nasha, destruction. And that which is never subject to birth is what? Never subject to vinasha, no destruction. Somebody is raising their hand. Is there a problem? Can you hear me? Or is it just you're checking out the features on the in the classroom? Huh? So, yeah, if you have any question, you can type it in there. Or if you cannot hear me, you can type it in the chat box. I will see what to do. So, the cup was already broken, he said. There was never a cup to begin with. And this is what is reiterated in the Bhagavad Gita. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuh dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmad apariharyarthe na kaschid shochum arhati. You don't deserve to grieve, O Arjuna, because that which is born is always born. That which is subject to death is always subject to death. So where is this grief? What is this grief centered on? What is this grief centered on? Is this grief real? Is this grief actual? Or are you crying over something that is just merely following a law of the universe? So what is gone here is what? What is gone? The word and the meaning. The name and the form, you can bid goodbye. And then what remains is that which was never born, that which never dies. So in the case of the bone cup, what remains? Clay, porcelain, whatever it is. And then that is always there, and you can say that. And same thing with gold and ornament. What remains? Gold. 1 million ornaments. How many golds? 1 gold. 1 million things. 1 million glittering ornaments. The glitter belongs to what? The ornaments or the gold? The gold. 1 million pots, 1 clay. And so this is the tattva, because the thatness of everything I refer to by the words this or that resolves in that one truth, which is myself, ultimately. That one truth alone is. So what about this everything else? There is no everything else. What everything else? No, all these things and the people and the situations and all these things that I'm worried about, and all the past and the future and all these things. They have an existence. We cannot say that they do not have an existence. But their existence is like what? Is like the existence of something that is dependent on something else. It's a projection. It's a projection of what? Myself. This I alone, it's a projection. Just like the ornament is the projection of gold, so this is a projection. And in this projection, all the things, the projections share a few characteristics. This whole jagat is a projection, like even my own dream, non-separate from the projector. This whole from the projector. So the whole jagat is a projection. And all the things that are projections, jagat means the universe, the manifest universe. And everything that's a projection shares some common characteristics. What is that? It is dependent on the projector. Number one. It arises from and resolves into that source from which it is non-separate. Number two. It does not have an independent reality. Number 3. And finally, number 4. It cannot be said to be non-existent. Yeah, we are not talking of that which is non-existent. If grief were non-existent, nobody would be taking Vedanta. Well, if samsara is non-existent, nobody will be taking Vedanta. Why? Otherwise we'll be having Lady Macbeth syndrome. She kept saying, out, out, you spot. Was there a spot? No. Where was the spot? In her head. So this is, samsara is not just in one's head. Ultimately you can say that. But really speaking, there is a reality. There is a reality of these projected names and forms that have the ability to do mischief based on one's own ragadveshas. When these projections interact with my likes and dislikes, or when I, the person who identifies with the raga and the dvesha, interact with these likes and dislikes, interact with the universe, and some very interesting situations happen. So therefore what? My view of this universe, the universe is as good as my view of it. And if my view of the universe is vitiated by my likes and dislikes, that is what is defined as samsara. This is what it is. And so, that is why we have all these Vedantic poetry that says you have to cross samsara, transcend this pain, transcend this fear, this body, this oceanic body of pain, fear, sorrow, apprehension of what the reality is has to be crossed. How to cross? When I think of crossing, I feel cross. This is the situation. How to cross? Where to cross? And this again has to be clear, because the crossing is not actual through action. And what is the crossing? If it's not actual, what is it? Virtual. That's what the reality is, right? Virtual. You can say it. The crossing is not, it's not actual. It is a cognitive exercise. Because the one who is desiring to cross is the one who is already free of this so-called effects of samsara. But then why is the person still needing to cross? Because the person doesn't know. That's all. So you see, the action has a certain efficacy, a certain importance is there in the action. The action produces result. But here, my problem, that I'm suffering because of my outlook, because of my attitude with which I'm seeing this universe, it's a personal problem. As Swamiji says, it's an inside job. It's an inside job. It has nothing to do with the universe. Because even if you don't like a few people in the universe, and if you go and tell them, I don't like your behavior, I don't like your clothes, I don't like how you look, and I don't like how you talk, you please change all these things. Are they going to change? No. Yeah. Everybody who's married knows this, You can't change the spouse, you can't change the child, you can't change anybody. This is how they are, correct? And let's say, even in a dream world, let us just sort of pretend that they will change. The weather, you can also go like this and make it 70 degrees outside. Sun is already there. So, and then we can change the weather, we can change everything to one person's liking. Let's say this fellow was able to manage to achieve the impossible. He changed the situation around him to just have the right temperature, the right weather, the right kind of house, the right kind of food, the right kind of, decor. And then what? Was this fellow happy? No. Why not? Because the first thing you do when you're able to change all this is call a significant other. and say, see, I was able to change all this. Do you like this? What will the other person say?